Tonight, I'm super excited to dive into this subject with you because it's something that I've been very, very passionate about for a very long time. And a lot of it is because of my own personal journey with not being able to regulate my energy levels, my emotions, my nervous system in particular, as well as I would like to. And through the years, I've really discovered how much that actually affects us. It affects everything from our health to our mental states, to our emotional states. So we're going to dive in pretty deep with this. So I hope you all are ready for jumping in. Let's start off with just a quick question because I'm curious. I'm just kind of checking who's here with us. I see Lorraine. Thanks for joining us again. Ashley's here. Maria's here. Donna's here. Kathleen, Dorota, Vicky, Zelchka, maybe from Deutschland, from Germany. Love that. Etu, maybe? Oh man, there's some challenging names in here. And Julia, good to have you all here. So type into the chat the number from 1 to 5 on how well you feel that you can regulate your energy. And what I mean by regulate your energy is how well do you feel you can regulate the kind of internal energy, the energy of your emotions, the energy of the mind, the energy of the body. How well do you feel like you can regulate that energy? One being not very well, like I'm kind of all over the place and I have no control over it. 5 would be, I feel like I really regulate super, super well. So 1's like, I'm all over the place. I can't regulate my energy very well. 5 would be that you are very, very good at it. I'd probably place myself, depending on the day, somewhere in the 4 range because I feel like I do now have the tools to be better with it. But I'm not going to lie because that's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to be honest and share with you from a very open place. There are definitely days that I would rate myself more on a 2. And there are reasons behind why I might rate myself at a 2. Cool. We've got Julia saying 4, Dorota saying 3, Lorraine's 2.5. Good answer. Kathleen's a 3, Ashley's a 4. Awesome. So what we want to dive into during this episode is we want to dive into what actually affects especially the nervous system in particular, because that's really the place that all of this starts. If the nervous system is out of whack, if we can't regulate the nervous system well, good luck being able to regulate emotion. Good luck being able to regulate whether you're sleepy, tired, or if you're really kind of buzzy, energetic. If we can't work with the nervous system, it's really difficult to work with anything else. So we're definitely going to dive into how we work with the nervous system. And we also want to talk about the things that actually affect those energetic cues within the body pretty directly. And there's quite a few of them. So the good news is that there's quite a few of them because each one, if we change it a little bit, can affect us. The bad news is there's also a lot of them. And so those can affect us in different ways. So if you're ready, you're excited, just type ready into the chat. As always, if you've been here before with me, I like to be really interactive with you. So please type comments, questions, whatever comes up, go ahead and pop them into the chat and I'll watch that chat really closely. So let's get started with talking a little bit about the nervous system. Julia's ready. Awesome. Julia's fast on the comments. I love it. Thank you, Julia. Dorota's ready, very ready. So, whoops, that's the wrong page. There we go. Here's what we need to know about the autonomic nervous system. So your autonomic nervous system is the part of the body that regulates the energetic vibe of the overall body. And I'm going to keep things as kind of simple and not too crazy scientific as possible because this can go really deep. So here's what you have to know about your autonomic nervous system. You really kind of have 2 sides to it. You have the sympathetic side. So let's talk about the sympathetic because I think many of you understand this really well. The sympathetic side is our fight flight side. How many of you have heard of fight or flight? I bet most of you, right? So what fight or flight does is it goes up, right? So we're going to think about this as like the upside of energy where we're getting activated. And very often you might hear the term up regulate. in relationship to how it's affecting the nervous system. So the sympathetic side of the nervous system is the part that gets us ready to fight or flight. So you can picture this, right? Like, you know what this feels like when you're in that, oh my gosh, I have to run away, or like you're in the, oh, I'm coming after you. What's your energy like? It's very high. It's very like fast and intense, right? So the parasympathetic is the other side of the nervous system. The parasympathetic is the down regulation. So this is, they call it the rest and digest. Because after a meal, you know how you get kind of sleepy? That's because the parasympathetic side of the nervous system is kind of taking priority so that we can rest, we can digest the food that we've just eaten. So the parasympathetic is the restful or kind of sleepy and chill out side of the nervous system. And again, I'm oversimplifying something that is much more complex than this, but this is what you have to know. So what we want is we want to have a state of coherence. And there's a couple of versions of what you kind of think of with coherence. Beauty by Alyssa. Will I be able to see the beginning of this? I missed it. Yes, but don't worry. You didn't miss much in the beginning. We're just kind of getting into the good stuff right now. So, but yes, anything you missed today, you can always come back to the Facebook and YouTube channel to watch. So there's a couple of different versions of how this plays out, depending on who you talk to and what specific belief systems that person has around the nervous system. But again, what's important for us to think about is what we want to be in most of our day is a state of what a lot of people call coherence. So what coherence is kind of the middle ground between sympathetic and parasympathetic. So this middle ground, what some believe, and not everyone believes this, but what some believes is it's kind of an equal activation of sympathetic and then parasympathetic, then sympathetic, then parasympathetic. And it's always kind of just surfing between those two aspects of our nervous system. Now, there's also a thing called Polyvagal Theory. And if you want more information on that, you're free to reach out to me. I'm not going to go into it in detail because we could have a whole class on polyvagal theory. It's actually quite interesting. But with polyvagal theory, instead of using the word coherence, they call it a ventral vagal state, which is basically the same energy of state, regardless of where you think it lives within the body, how it's actually happening. Coherence and ventral vagal state are kind of talking about the same thing, which is that, like, I'm cool, I'm chill, like I'm not super activated, but I'm also not falling asleep. I'm still sharp, I'm still precise with my focus. And what most will agree on is that is our natural state, is to be in that state of coherence, to be in that state of ventral vagal, where we're pretty chill, we're pretty peaceful, and also very focused and alert. But we're not over here on the sympathetic side where it's like, oh, okay, that's not chill and alert, that's activated. But we also don't want to be too far over here in the parasympathetic, because that is the rest and digest. And in that state, we're pretty like, oh yeah, man, I'm like super chill. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like meditating all day. So we don't want to be too far into either state. Now, the reason that this is important is this is what sets us up to understand, well, what do we want? Where do we want to be? And how do we get there? So like we said, we want to be in a state kind of in that idea of coherence, or if you want to get geeky and dive into polyvagal theory, it's called ventral vagal. There are lots of things that affect this. One of the first things that you can always reach to, and this is a great thing because it's always with you, is this. It's the breath. And what's beautiful about the breath is the breath actually has a direct influence and direct connection to our nervous system. So just like we talked about with the parasympathetic and the sympathetic side, the in-breath is activating. The out-breath is down-regulating. So the in-breath is the sympathetic activation, and the out-breath is parasympathetic. So if we want to have that state of ventral vagal, or that very nice, calm, but alert state, you can imagine that the very logical thing is that we would want to have equal in-breath with equal out-breath. And you're exactly right. So this is called, well, it's called quite a few different things. It's called coherence breathing. It's called balance breathing. It can be called a number of different things. But the most important thing you need to know is, if you want to have that state of, I'm calm, I'm collected, but I'm focused, equal number in, equal number out is a very easy way to find yourself into that space. So do this with me real quick. Just as you're sitting there, just take a few breaths in and out. And as you take a breath in, just count how many seconds that breath in is. So just do that with me for a few moments. Just count how many seconds you take a breath in. And then match that with your breath out. So if you're breathing in for about 3 or 4 seconds, you're going to breathe out for about 3 or 4 seconds. And all through the nose, no mouth here. And that's a whole different subject, but all nose. So just a nice gentle breath in, gentle breath out, and just make that really equal. And just keep doing that as I'm talking here. Just kind of stay with 3 or 4 seconds in. Maybe some of you are comfortable at 5 or 6 seconds, which is ideal, supposedly. But the most important thing is that it's an even breath in and an even breath out. So just stay with that as I'm talking you through this. Lorraine's saying you're about 4 seconds. And I do find that people that don't do a lot of breath work usually are pretty comfortable in that 3 to 4 seconds in, 3 to 4 seconds out. That seems to be a general population pretty comfortable. After you do some work with this, you'll probably find that you're a little bit more comfortable with 5, working up to 6. So, but just continue with that breath. And I just want you to notice what starts to happen to your energy. What starts to happen for you? Type it into the chat. Just after even you've probably taken maybe 10 breaths so far of just focusing on that nice, gentle, even pace in and even pace out. What's happening for you? Type that into the chat. Now, the theory is, again, because the in-breath is that sympathetic side of the nervous system, and then the out-breath is the parasympathetic side, what this does is it gives us kind of an equal activation. That's the theory behind this. And there are many other ways to use breath to get into that more balanced state, but this one's very easy for most people. And the other thing that this is doing is actually helping with something called heart rate variability, which is another major factor to how well our overall body's systems work and perform. Heart rate variability is incredibly powerful, and actually more variability is better, because as you take that breath in, the heart actually speeds up a little bit, because the sympathetic side of the nervous system, other things that are happening within the body, are creating the heart to beat a little bit faster. So your pulse will actually raise with the in-breath, and then the pulse actually decreases with the out-breath. So with that increase in out-breath, that's called heart rate variability, and more variation that we get is actually better. And the longer that we continue to have that consistency of that nice variable pace of the heart, but the more that we have that, use your words, Andrew, come on, get it together here. But the longer that we can sustain that beautiful heart rate variability and that balanced and coherent breath, incredible things happen within the body. There are just countless numbers of health effects that happen from good heart rate variability and from getting into coherence. Chic Messy Hot Gypsy, I love your name, by the way, said blood pressure drop. Yeah, it does actually help with blood pressure. Julia, does counting your breath do anything? Great question. And I see that you said above that you feel a little bit calmer. So there's 2 things that are happening when we do count like this. The one thing is we do get to even out the breath, but the other thing too is it's sort of a form of meditation. Because one of the first things that if you start to learn meditation, one of the first meditation practices that most people learn is called single point focus meditation, which is just that you bring your focus, you bring the mind's focus to something specific. So by counting 1, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, because you have to consciously count that out, because you have to direct the mind to it, it's actually a form of single point meditation. So yeah, you can actually get a great kind of meditative experience too through that counting of the breath. So great question there. Dorota said, feeling very calming. Lorraine, you said you're getting lightheaded. And so sometimes, Lorraine, what might happen as you start to do some of these breathwork practices, well, there's quite a few things that can happen. But sometimes that experience of lightheadedness, as long as it doesn't take you into like, whoa, I feel like I'm going to calm down. If it just sort of feels like that, that spaciness, that might be okay, because it actually could be the carbon dioxide in the bloodstream starting to build a little bit. And actually that helps to release oxygenation into the tissues. And that can actually give you a little bit of that kind of lightheadedy, like, ooh, sort of feeling. So as long as it's not like a, whoa, I'm going to pass out sort of feeling, I wouldn't say that it's a bad thing necessarily, but keep an eye on it. If it's something that's consistent, reach out, send me a message or something on social, and we can figure out maybe what's happening there for you. Cool. So one of the first things, again, as far as energetic regulation that is always on your side, that you always have in your back pocket, is the breath. It's always there for you. And just doing this balanced, coherent breathing for a few minutes each day can be incredibly helpful. There are studies showing that 3 to 5 minutes of this coherent breathing, the effects can last for like 60 minutes at a time, just off of 3 minutes of breath work. Pretty cool, right? So that's one of the ways that we can access and regulate our energetic vibe. Now, I would be curious, just pop into the chat, what other things do you feel affect your energy? And when I say your energy, I don't just mean, do I have energy to like walk through my day, or do I feel tired? That's one aspect of energy, but it's also just the feeling of energy within you. Is the feeling of energy, and like we talked about, that sympathetic, charged up, like, whoa, I need to fight or flight, or is it like really peaceful, really calm? And of course, throughout our day, because of the things we're going to talk about here, those things are going to change. And a lot of it is, are we able to ride the wave of that change in our energy, or does it kind of take us over? That's what we're talking about with emotional art and energetic regulation. It's not that things are flatline. You know, we talk about balance, and if you've been here before with us, this is something we've talked about in the past, is the idea of balance. And there isn't really a true balance in the way that we tend to think about it, which is this flat and even space where it's just constant all the time. That's not the real world. It's more like this, right? And so what the goal is to find some harmony within that we can ride that wave of like, okay, today is a little up. Well, you know, today I'm feeling a little bit more down. But can we ride that wave in a way that it doesn't take us over? That's the regulation aspect. Awesome. Beauty by Elisa says contagious. Lorraine helps to know the schedule. Otherwise, I feel anxious. Yeah, so that's great. Thank you. Yes, energy is very contagious. Beauty by Elisa says, I realized that the other day at the doctor's, the assistant was way amped up and it was way too maybe high for you or something like that. Music, staying in your lane, she cut messy gypsy. Yes, there's lots of different things that influence our energy. So let's go, you know, Lorraine mentioned like just knowing our schedule. So lifestyle in general, just the big picture of lifestyle. how we schedule our days, how we live through our days, that is really probably one of the greatest influencers on our overall energy. Because if the lifestyle itself is keeping us in that sympathetic tone, if we have a lifestyle that's always keeping us in fight or flight, it's going to be kind of a band-aid to do everything else, to change the diet, to change our breathing patterns. It's like we have one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake all the time, right? So if we have a lifestyle that always keeps us in that sympathetic tone, we're always stressed out, we're always fighting, that's going to be really tough. So, things that we might find might help us are having a better schedule, sticking to our schedule, having boundaries, having emotional boundaries, as well as time and energy boundaries. So, looking at our lifestyle and seeing, okay, what about my lifestyle is either supportive of me having healthy regulation of my energy, or what parts of my lifestyle are putting me constantly in this big swing between fight or flight or way over here into parasympathetic, which one of the things of parasympathetic, like I was mentioning about the polyvagal theory, there's this thing called dorsal vagal, which is the parasympathetic side, but it's like the full shutdown side. So some of you might have experienced, you get so much into the fight or flight and you're so overstimulated, you are so far into that state that you kind of nosedive sometimes, and it's almost like you have to go into hiding. That's that state of dorsal vagal, and that's parasympathetic. So again, we want to try and keep ourselves out of way too fight or flight, but we also want to keep ourselves out of that space that we're so far over into the parasympathetic side that it's like a shutdown. And so things like Chic Hot Miss Gypsy said, like staying in our lane, focusing on what we have control over, those types of things could be lifestyle choices that help us with the energetic regulation. And Beauty by Elisa, not that this was your point, but also being conscious of who we're spending time with and how we're spending time with people. As hairdressers, that can be challenging, yes, because we don't always have a choice of who sits in our chair. And like you said, Beauty by Elisa, it can be really contagious if our client sitting in the chair is really amped up and really stressed out. That can kind of affect us, right? And so we do have to kind of make those choices within lifestyle to make sure that we have that ability to get some harmony back into that energy. It helps with my balance when I can't control. Oh, okay, that's good. Because sometimes that's real hard. Julia says block. Yes, sometimes we have to block certain people and certain energies to make sure that we can emotionally and energetically regulate. So let's talk about food and beverage, because this one is a tough conversation, especially for me, because I love food and I love beverage. And when I say beverage, I do mean of the 21 and older kind. So here's the thing, is that if you would like to know more about how alcohol affects our entire body, this is huge. And it's kind of some new information for me even, is I'm going to have Katie, who's behind the scenes here, we're going to pop in the link for you of a podcast by Dr. Andrew Huberman. He is a Stanford professor. He does incredible podcasts for those of us that are super geeky and love to know all the scientific stuff behind the scenes. But he doesn't go so far into the technical that he will lose you if you don't want the technical side. But really, really interesting research about how alcohol does affect, especially the nervous system, even for those of us that don't think we drink a lot. Consistent alcohol use, which could be 1 drink per night. It could also be, I just drink on the weekends and I have 1 or 2 beers, like on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night. That is actually considered consistent and regular behavior of alcohol consumption. So what does actually happen is that in the moment that we initially consume alcohol, it can actually take us into more of a parasympathetic state. It can calm you down. And it's one of the things that I've often enjoyed is like, oh my gosh, I have a stressful day. I'm going to have a whiskey. I'm going to have a glass of wine. And I've never felt that I've had really an issue being able to be like, yeah, I'll have a glass of wine. And it makes you feel good. It makes you chill out. You enjoy your wine. What they're finding is that what happens the next day, though, even after one beverage, is that the nervous system actually starts to upregulate. So while you have the beverage, yes, you do feel the downregulation into more of the parasympathetic, you feel the calming effect. But what they see with people that do have some type of regular habit, even if it's very under control, is that even if it's just one drink a night or just a few on the weekends, every weekend, after the alcohol is gone, the nervous system tends to upregulate into sympathetic more. So if you find that you are already kind of struggling with some regulation, I would highly recommend you check out this podcast. It might influence you a bit to look at your habits with alcohol until you can get the nervous system back under control and find yourself back into regulation. I think he does a good job of not demonizing alcohol, and that's not my point by any stretch of the imagination, because trust me, I love my beer, I love wine, I love a whiskey. But I do also now know that especially the thing that I think I'm doing to kind of like calm myself down is leaving me now set up for the next day to go the opposite direction. And it's not helpful. So just something to consider. Caffeine, also, let's face it, hairdressers, we love our caffeine. We love our coffee, yes. But caffeine does have a direct stimulating effect to the nervous system. It's just a fact. And you feel that. That's why we reach for it very often. Hey, Sonia, good to see you. So, again, there's actually nothing, I'm not trying to demonize caffeine in any way, shape, or form. It's making choices based on how we feel. And if we're already in a state that the emotional regulation and the energetic regulation is low within our life, that's where I think we need to look at these contributing factors if they are being healthy or helpful to us. I love it. Coffee cups and hearts. Yes, absolutely. The thing with the caffeine is kind of the same thing with the alcohol, is it really has a yo-yo effect on the nervous system. So again, we kind of are putting something into our body that is increasing or actually inhibiting our ability to have that energetic regulation. So again, just trying to offer you some ideas as far as if you are finding yourself in stressful situations often, if you feel like you are having a hard time regulating your nervous system and keeping your balance within your nervous system, these are some things we need to look at. Elisa says, I feel attacked. Oh, Elisa, you're doing some thinking now, huh? Yes. That's what this is for. It's just to make us think, right? And you get to make the informed decision of what you do with it. Now, also foods, of course. The apparent one's sugar. Sugar definitely has a direct effect on the nervous system, and it also has a really big swing, almost more than the caffeine does, as far as the studies go. Inflammatory foods, dairy, wheat, for some people, even eggs and soy, and there's lots of different inflammatory foods. Those can also have a very direct effect, not just on the inflammation within the body, but on the nervous system itself and through that inflammatory effect. But again, I don't want to go into the details. So what I would suggest is if you do find patterns, pay attention to those patterns. If it's like, well, some days I really feel quite calm and quite peaceful, and I feel like I can regulate my nervous system. Look back at the day before. What happened the day before? Was there drinking? Was there caffeine? Was there sugar? Was there certain types of foods? So what happened the next day Oh, okay. Yeah, yesterday, interesting. I didn't have any alcohol yesterday. And I just had my one cup of coffee in the morning. I didn't have my afternoon coffee. Oh yeah, and I actually ate pretty clean yesterday. Okay, yeah, I do feel pretty good today. Then on the days that you wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, I can feel the anxiety coming in. I don't feel like I have control over this. Again, go back. What happened the day before? What type of external influences happened? What type of stressful events? What type of foods went into your body? What type of beverages went into the body? And start to try to make those connections, because that's how we can understand this for ourselves. Everything that I'm sharing with you is just studies. And within those studies, not everyone had those effects. Not everyone felt a raise in their sympathetic nervous system after they had a drink the night before. It wasn't 100%. So this isn't across the board. We have to do this research. I love Carlo Novoa, my friend that I do Testimony Thursdays with. He always calls it me search. And that's just as important as listening to this and understanding the scientific stuff behind it. So, yes, Sonia, I always miss your absence, my friend. I'm so happy you're here. So yeah, and it's gonna be a professional. I think that's Katie commenting there, says that there's no hurt in trying it out, and that is exactly what I would suggest. Great suggestion there, Katie. Very often it's just like, well, if you have a hunch that something might be affecting you in a certain way, just do a test. Give yourself 5 days, give yourself 7 days, and try something different and just see how you feel. Because a lot of times it's like, oh, well, I have to commit now. I have to commit to it. I'm not drinking at all 7 days a week, and I'm going to switch from, regular coffee to decaf, and I'm going to cut out all the sugar. And that feels really overwhelming. Those types of commitments are hard to stay committed to. So instead of we think about like, hey, well, let's do an experiment. Let's see how I feel if I do this. That's a great way to not get freaked out by this overwhelming commitment. So thank you for putting that in there, Katie. So it looks like Julia is going to practice some breathing. Awesome. Love that. I can't tell you, breath work has been, I would say the single most impactful thing I've ever picked up as a practice. And I have to tell you this, I don't do a ton of it. It's not like I dedicate 2 hours a day to breath work. It's some days I do a little longer practice. I have, like if I do my full breath work practice, it's about a 45-minute practice. But really, it's often maybe 10 or 15 minutes here, 10 or 15 minutes there. But you also learn how to include that breathwork practice into your daily life, because that's what we want. Is we want this to become habit in our daily life. So yes, working with the breath, I couldn't possibly encourage you enough. Oh, Beauty by Elisa says, I did a caffeine and sugar detox and I saw it was the best thing ever. Less body aches. Yes, absolutely. I needed this. Tomorrow I breathe and no clean eating. And going back to the clean eating. Awesome. Yeah, one of the side effects of going into that sympathetic state within our nervous system is the nerves themselves are more sensitive. So if we are in a very kind of sympathetic state, the nerves actually become very sensitive too. So if there is body pain, it tends to be worse when we're in anxious states. So it's good that you noticed that. And of course, I'm sure the inflammation within your body was much lower too during that detox. So that would make a big difference. So here are a few things that you can do beyond just the breathing. Energy within the body, if it becomes stagnant, can become very poisonous. And this is something that I've been learning from, I wouldn't say that I'm studying Ayurveda, but I have quite a few people in my life that are influencing my life that know a lot about the Ayurveda and the teachings of the yogis. And so what I'm starting to understand especially is that anything, the alcohol, the caffeine, the foods, they can be medicine, they can be food, or they can be poison. Our energy can be very good for us, or it can be poison. And it's all in how we utilize it and how we interact with it. So energy, if it gets stuck, that's when it becomes poison. And Katie behind the scenes, she's got one of the people that I watch really closely is a man named Dr. Svoboda, and my friend Sean Float introduced me to him, and he's an Ayurvedic practitioner, but this man really knows the ins and outs of Ayurveda. And one of his posts that actually came up just today that I thought was perfect was talking about moving things through, that they have to have fluidity to it, a word called rasa. And so if it has that fluidity to it, it does not sit in the body and become poison. But if it becomes blocked, if it becomes held, that's when it becomes very dangerous to us. So if you're feeling energy, we need to move it. And so that can be through physical movement, of course, but also just expressing that sensation, because emotion is just energy, right? It's just energy. So if we're feeling in a certain emotion, but we choose to hold it in, we choose to block it up, that is going to affect our energy. That is going to affect if we feel like we can have that calm focus, or if we do have that distraction of the sympathetic charge. So moving the energy either physically or through some type of expression, whether that's music, poetry, just talking to a good friend, those types of things help to keep that energy moving through the body. One of the best things that I was taught, and this was through my study of multiple brain integration techniques, is just clearing energy through the body, through quite literally just throwing it off. And if you're somewhere that you feel comfortable doing this, do this with me. If you just gotta like find something in your body that you're just like, God, I want this energy out, and just bring your focus to it, and just kind of like get it into your hands, and then throw it off. So just whatever you feel is kind of like stuck in there, just get it into your hands, get it out into your arms, and just throw it off. And it's really cool. It works, right? Like if you've tried it, it actually works incredibly well. And so sometimes when I do start to feel that buildup, like I start to feel myself heading in that upswing into that sympathetic state, I just go outside and just kind of throw my arms off a couple times, just some big breaths out. You can even yell is fantastic to kind of give it like a, and just kind of really shout it out. This is awesome for clearing stuck energy. So physical movement or expression is a great way to make sure we keep the energy moving through the body. So breath work, looking at our diet, looking at movement and expression, and then also just being conscious of what we take in. I think this is something that is challenging, right? Because I don't want to demonize this thing, but let's face it, we spend a lot of time just doing this, right? And a lot of times we don't really know what's coming in through our senses through that scroll. It's like we stop on something and it's like terrible news. Oh, okay. Well, and then we scroll to the next thing. And we don't necessarily notice in that moment how it affects us. But if everything we're seeing through our feed, and then, the next video is destruction of this, global warming that, war here, COVID this, it's like we're going to absorb that. And yes, of course, we want to be informed, but we don't want to be inundated. So if you need this, hear it from me. I'm giving you permission right now to shut that shit out once in a while. Because if we just keep consuming that, that's when we're trying to fight back from what we're feeding ourselves, because we're feeding our eyes, we're feeding our mind with what we pick up in our feed. So just be conscious of that. What are you feeding yourself? Not just food, not just water, not just beverage, but also with information. Maybe putting some limits on time that we are spending with certain types of information. Like, hey, if you like the evening news, go for it. Like, that's your thing. But know when to shut it off too, when it starts to take you into a place that you can no longer energetically or emotionally regulate yourself because you're taking so much in. You're not helping anything. You're not helping yourself. You're not helping anybody if you're in a state of non-regulation. So be conscious and cautious of what we are feeding ourselves is the point. Yeah, Dorota, great. I think that comment came in when I was kind of talking about throwing it off. Yeah, kind of pushing out that breath, like, that can feel really good to just get that energy out. Just be conscious that it also does kind of tend to amp you up a little bit. So not too much of that. Oh, thanks, Sonia. I appreciate that. So, Tracy, I'm going to get to this comment real quick. I eat clean, no gluten, eggs, dairy too, no caffeine, no alcohol, exercise and deep breathing at night, working in an organic salon. Ooh, nice. Feels so much better, so much healthier. Yes, and Tracy says it was a process and trial and error, but so worth it. Yeah, I'm sure that was quite the journey, Tracy, because those are a lot of things to take out of the diet, a lot of changes to make to your routines. So that's awesome. And I love hearing that there are a lot more salons going to more organic, content within the products, lower chemical loads in the airs, things like that, because everything affects everything, right? So here's what I would love to hear from you is in the chat, share one thing that you're curious about that you might test this week or next week. And again, I'm not saying, what are you going to change? I'm asking you, what's something you want to play with? I might do a little break from this certain substance or food or whatever it might be. Or I'm going to try to, get some breathing in each day. So what's something that you might be willing to play with over the next week or so? Pop that into the chat because, hey, once you put it out there, we can help support you from an energetic place to follow through with it. So pop that into the chat. And the one thing I would like to encourage you to do, if you're not already doing this, is bring in some type of mindful practice of understanding let me change how I said that. Bring in some type of practice that makes us mindful and brings presence to how the things that are happening and the things that we're doing and the things that we're putting into our body, how it actually affects us. Because most of the time we're just running on habit. So until we become conscious, like we were talking about earlier, of like, okay, this is what yesterday looked like. These are the experiences I have. This is what I ate. This is what I drank. This is how I treated myself. This is how much time I, spent exercising, all that stuff. And today I feel this certain way. Until we start to become conscious of what those things are that are creating these patterns for us, it becomes really hard to test and to try something new to get to a place. So maybe that's a little bit of a journaling process at the end of the night. Maybe it's just sitting and being present at the end of the day. I have a practice that before I kind of shut down my computer and stuff at the end of my workday, I just sit and I just kind of look back at my day. What happened? How did I feel? How did I take care of myself? And so finding some time to just mindfully understand how our lifestyle is affecting us, I think is just a great practice to include into your daily life. So Claudia says 1 cup of coffee instead of 2. Awesome. I love that. That is a great experiment, Claudia, because it's not like, I'm going to take everything away. It's just like, you know what? I'm just going to cut it in half and see how I feel. And if you feel great next week after doing that, maybe you'll go, okay, maybe I'm going to switch to half calf and see how that goes. It's all just the experiment. Julia's going to be doing some breathing. Tracy's going to take a break from the stressful news. Bless you. Love that. TJ here. All right. TJ is much easier to pronounce than the name that's on your title there. TJ here. Stay off social media during work hours. Sweet. I love that. Dorota's going to do some breathing and less coffee. I love it. Great experiments. And hey, if you feel inclined, I would love to hear how this is going for you. So you all know where to find me on social media. You can just shoot me a message. My information's right under my face down here. Send me a message and let me know how things are going. If you have any questions on anything that we talked about tonight, you can always, of course, come back and rewatch right here on the Sam via YouTube and Facebook channels, or you're welcome to reach out to me through my website or through my social.